This is the second time I'm recording this video. Hey guys, Otaku here, back with another video, and today we're going to be doing a meta tier list for the upcoming format of Justice Hunters. And yeah, as the intro implied, this is the second time I'm recording this because I actually recorded this video yesterday as of uploading this video. And that was immediately when, like 10 minutes after I finished recording the video, Konami said, nope, we're not getting a ban list. And the entire video was revolved around the idea that Mitsurugi, Ryzeal, and Malice were not going to be top contending decks in the upcoming format. Well, according to Konami, they're here to stay until at least after World. So on top of the already like somewhat diverse format with Mitsurugi, Ryzeal just kind of reigning dominant, we have 3 ready to play out the box decks. And I'm not gonna lie, Konami, this is kind of an L on your part, because normally you do ban lists to sell product, and when Mitsurugi Ryzeal is as powerful as it is, you're still gonna sell the product, but it's not gonna be as effective as it could have been. Before we do jump on into the tier list though, I have noticed that a great deal of you that are watching this video right now are not subscribed to the channel, so if you like competitive based content, guides, and tier lists, consider subscribing to the channel for more. But don't forget to leave a like on this video and comment down below your thoughts on the upcoming format. I personally think gonna kind of be a shit show with not only Paradise Smasher, but also like Protoss and shit running around. And if you would like to further support the channel though, consider joining my community Discord, following me over on Twitch, and using my TCG affiliate link and my Dueling Guard affiliate link. All links will be in the description down below. Okay, so yeah, the first time I recorded this video, I wasn't even talking about the different variants of Ryzeal. I was just talking about Ryzeal as a whole. And then, yeah, Mitsurugi Ryzeal's here to stay. So down below here, we have a handful of decks that have been topping, but there's also a couple of decks that are obviously new with certain variants. There's one major rule here for this tier list, and that is decks that are not confirmed to have K9 in them, because for those who are not fully aware, K9 is projected to be a massive engine going forward, and almost any deck that can fit it in will fit it in, kind of like what happened with Fiendsmith. So I'm not really looking to hear in the comments like, oh, Madolche's crazy with the new K9 cards, like Joe Cool's 1-card combo, why didn't you talk about that? It's all just theory right now. So I'm just going to talk about the decks that are confirmed to have K9 going into the next format, like Vanquish Soul and Crystron, but everything else is just like iffy. As for our tiers, we have the best deck in the room. There's going to be one deck in general up here, and that's just going to be Ryzeal Mitsurugi, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But we have running the format. These are the decks that will be running alongside Ryzeal Mitsurugi, still topping like regionals and all that, because most likely we'll be having regionals again before the new ban list comes out. These are just kind of like the decks that are up there with Ryzeal Mitsurugi for sure, because Ryzeal Mitsurugi is logistically the best deck in the room, but it's obviously not the deck that's going to be winning every event. I mean, shit, look at Nats. It wasn't even like that popular. It didn't have a lot of representation, but there will be a lot of decks in the running the format that are keeping up with Ryzeal Mitsurugi to the point where they are kind of considered an equal. Top contenders, these are the decks that are able to keep up with the rest of the format based on siding options and matchups, and just overall, they are still able to perform. Good pilot / rogue, that's exactly what it is. Rogue, you need to have a good pilot to be able to perform. And, obviously your matchups also are dependent on that. Bottom tables, these are decks you shouldn't be playing right now. These are just realistically decks that are not going to perform in the current format, especially with the massive clusterfuck of bullshit going on. So yeah, best deck in the room, and I think everyone can kind of agree with this. Ryzeal Mitsurugi, by a fucking long mile, is just the best deck in the room. It has been outpacing just damn near every deck in the current format, with only a few things countering it, like Droll and Lockbird and Mistaken Arrest. Obviously, people are gonna make my comments like, oh, it wasn't really that popular at the NAWCQ, like it didn't even win the event, it wasn't even in top 4. Correct, but there wasn't a lot of representation because it was the deck to beat. Also on top of that, the new decks coming in like K9, Yummy, and Draco Tail, they don't really play well going into a Detonator and a Murakumo. Like, Murakumo just blanks shit and just says no. Yummy definitely is, like, probably the better option because they don't activate their effects in hand, so, like, the Detonator can't pop a material when you go to summon one. They're all just inherent summons. So as long as you're not, like, using effects, then you can maybe, like, establish some kind of board. But also on top of that, Cross will just negate one of the Synchros, or Murakumo will just nuke the board after he comes back from being tributed by Ritual. Like, there's just the new decks coming in can't really compete with the power level of Raizio Mitsurugi. Like, they will obviously be able to contend, but it's going to be a lot on who wins the die roll. So running the format, there's going to be a handful of decks here. As you can see, we're just going to be talking about like the new decks and the obvious decks. So we're just going to put all of them up here that are going to definitely be up here. Keep note, I'm not putting Draco Tail up there, and I'll get into that into a moment. Malice, I mean, it's Malice. Malice is essentially still full power with like semi-limits to a couple of their cards, but it's fine because they filled the gaps with the Adignisters. Malice is also one of the decks in the format that can run Dominus Impulse, which there's not many of those that can be doing that. But I mean, at the same time, like, Malice has been competing with Raizio Mitsurugi for the past couple months now, and I mean, still for the most part losing unless they win the die roll, but it is still very much able to compete in the current format because the format's not really changing all that much. And we already know from OCG that Malice is able to compete with the new cards coming in, Justice Hunters. It's able to compete with Yummy, Vanquish Soul, all that. So it's not that surprising that it's going to still be in the running the format bracket. Raizio Fiendsmith and Raizio Onomat, I considered leaving Onomat out because it's not really like its own deck. It's like Raizio Mitsurugi with like Dododo whatever and all that. Just kind of, there's like small engines slammed in just for extra level 4s, but I decided to put it in because we'll just establish this as like an engine. Like Raizio Onomat by itself isn't like a competitive deck, but Raizio Onomat mixed into like Fiendsmith or Mitsurugi is also still a very viable thing. But I mean, they're not the best version of Raizio, nor are they the cheapest, might I add, but it is still just, they're playable decks. Raizio is still Raizio. Raizio is really good right now against like the Vanquish Soul Canine that's going to come out, because this Detonator can like pop the target that's going to be bounced from the Vanquish Soul effects. And then on top of that, like, Canine can't really do anything with Raizio because Raizio's in a similar boat as Yummy, where all their monsters are inherent summons. They don't activate in hand. And also on top of that, they don't really activate in the graveyard either, minus like Eclipse Twins, really. So like Raizio's able to counter Canine and Vanquish Soul pretty fine. Not to mention, you know, X Send Aggregator is still just a fantastic board breaker. You just go X Send Aggregator, target like the Masquerade, and like, what do they, I mean, they can still negate it, and then, yeah, that's a thing, but, you know, it's still just a powerful board-breaking strategy. One of the brand new decks out of Justice Hunters is very much going to be a top contender because, like I said, Yummy is like one of those things that it is able to just kind of establish a board without really activating effects, which then means you're not, like, setting off the Detonator, or you are able to control what effects you could maybe bait out of it. On top of that, it is able to just like really OTK, flood the board with a bunch of shit. But the problem is like Mitsurugi, really? The same problem like Malice has had for a while. It's like Malice does not have a good matchup against Mitsurugi, and really neither does Yummy. Murakumo is just like a guy, and on top of that, he can nuke the board when he's tributed. They have the Omni Negate, obviously, but overall, Yummy is still, like, very powerful. On top of that, Yummy is going to be able to play Dominus Purge and Song of the Dominators because Canine's going to be everywhere. So they are going to be heavily prioritizing their Trap hand traps rather than their monster hand traps. And Purge and Song actually go pretty good when you're going second against Raizio Mitsurugi. Vanquish Soul Canine. So we saw Vanquish Soul already pretty popular at the NAWCQ. Able to compete with decks like Malice and Raizio Mitsurugi, and the deck's only getting better with the Canine cards coming out. A lot of decks right now, though, are not playing from hand or graveyard, minus the hand traps, obviously. Like, a lot of the popular decks in the current format, like Malice and Raizio, don't really do graveyard effects. They do banishment and field effects, not really hand effects. So it will struggle a little bit there, but it's still just a very competent deck, as we saw at Nats. On a quick touch, though, of Canine, I could actually see Canine getting played in, like, Raizio, as long as Raizio's smart about it, because obviously they lock themselves into 4s from the extra deck, but Canine just kind of getting out bodies for sure is something that's a likelihood. But what I can really see, since Mitsurugi hasn't really been hit in the slightest, is that Vanquish Soul just plays King of the Feral Imps, rank 4 the Mad Love and the Rosin to make king, and then look at that, you're playing Vanquish Soul, Canine, Mitsurugi. Oh, lovely. One thing to note too with a lot of the decks that we're talking about today is simply because Raizu Mitsurugi is going to still be like the top contending deck, and Vanquish Soul also feels this quite a bit on top of Canine feeling it, is Droll and Lockbird and Mistaken Arrest are going nowhere. They will still be very, very popular cards because they hit the best deck in the room, and then Vanquish Soul Canine is still a very powerful deck, and, you know, they kind of don't like getting hit with Droll and Lockbird either. Not to mention, on top of that, obviously we have the Charmies to think about, like Fuelos and Perulia are obviously being main decked most likely in every deck at 3-of still, because they both hit the best deck in the room, but Perulia hurts Vanquish Soul quite a bit, and the Canines aren't helping with that, but Vanquish Soul can play around Fuelos. They only link once, and realistically, they don't always even have to do that. But on top of that, like I said, Yummy and Ryzeal are very similar in playstyle, in the sense that Perulia hurts Yummy a lot as well. Like, they don't want to see Perulia hit the board, and Fuelos also not ideal either, so we're going to see a lot of that. So Yummy players, really learn how to play under your Mole Charmies, because it's going to be relevant with 6 of them still running in the main deck. Draco Tail, I think out of the 3 decks coming out of Justice Hunters, Draco Tail is the weakest, and that is simply because we don't have Spoon. Draco Tail's most popular build in the OCG is Draco Tail Magistus, with Draco Tail Canine being a close second, and then Branded right behind it. But Draco Tail, just without Spoon, there's no reason to play the Magistus cards, which means their best build is not viable. And I think because of that, it is going to severely feel that. But on top of that, Draco Tail has to play into Ryzeal. A big thing with the Draco Tail fusion monsters is they require a Draco Tail monster plus 1 monster in hand. And sometimes, more than not, you're using a Draco Tail monster that's already on the board. But if Detonator pops that, then you're going to have to use 1 in hand, which means you're really, like, going negative. On top of that, you activate monster effects in hand, which means you're triggering Canine effects, and I think it's really just going to be an uphill battle. I don't think it's going to be bad by any means, but it is certainly an uphill battle. The deck can play under Perulia. It cannot, well, actually, no, it can play under Droll, because they add back cards from graveyard to hand, and they set spells and traps, so they're not really worrying about Droll Lockbird or Mistaken Arrest. Like, it shuts off their Rhoda, which is also a fusion spell, but it's not like the end of the world. So it has the ability to play under some of the more annoying hand traps going around right now, but I think playing into a fully established board of Mitsurugi Ryzeal is something it will struggle with. Art Mage, I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna have to put this in bottom tables. We did see it on day 1 of Nats, and it was like fine, but it still doesn't, like, have an end goal. And even in Doom of Dimensions, the 2 Archmage cards that were revealed, not really pushing for that. They still don't really have an end goal, like a win condition. And the one that they do kind of have is not, like, good enough. They have, like, a Dark Ruler No More effect. Like, boy. On top of that, the Doom of Dimensions archetype Doom Z only plays Medius, so it's like not even, you know, applicable for the archetype at all. So I'm gonna just put it in bottom tables. Like, if you like this deck, you know, more power to you, but I don't think it's like performing pretty much. Blue Eyes, I'm gonna die on this hill. So full disclaimer, if Ryzeal Detonator was not in the format, I do think Blue Eyes would be a better deck. Blue Eyes does not like Detonator because he just pops the True Light off of the board, and then next thing you know, your board is nuked. I still think this is the case. I don't think Blue Eyes is that great. Like I said it in the last Chillers video, and you all railed me for it, but it did not perform at Nats for a reason. Blue Eyes is just, it's not that good of a deck. It's, in my opinion, Blue Eyes is too fair of a deck for what we're playing in the current format. Branded. In the last version of this video, the one that will not make it up on YouTube because it doesn't make sense now that we're not getting a ban list, I said Branded was actually, like, in a good position going into the next format. I do think Branded is going to incorporate some of the Dragon Tail cards, because Femeta can let you just fusion summon on your opponent's turn, which is things that Branded really likes to do. So I can definitely see Branded incorporating some of the Dragon Tail cards into their already incredibly tight deck and extra tech, but It's something that I can definitely see. There will probably be Draco Tail branded variants running around. However, I think with Cross still being around and just Mitsurugi doing its thing, I don't think that anymore. I do think that Branded is kind of like an iffy deck. Branded really likes to resolve their effects, and if Cross is negating or Mitsurugi Murakumo is making you discard a card or it gets negated, it's just not, you know, it's not happening. Chimera, my Chimera lovers, I think we are currently being outpaced in the upcoming format. We have decks like Yummy, Vanquish Soul Canine, Malice, and Ryziel Mitsurugi. Just, our deck has become a little too fair for everything going on, and I just said that with Blue Eyes, and it's very much the case. Like, Chimera, for the longest time, I've been saying, is an unbreakable end board if you go first. Unfortunately, Ryziel X said no to that because he sends Aggregator, negates like the Diabells, or baits out an Omni Negate from Sylvia or whatever. And then the Ryziel players just go off. But now on top of that, we have decks like Vanquish Soul that can literally build a Vanquish Soul board on turn 0 when they lose the die roll, meaning that you're going to be interrupted even if they don't have a hand trap in hand. If they have Holy Sue, they can pretty much get to Caesar and all the attributes they need to just nuke a guy off the board. And then on top of that, they also search follow-up. And that's kind of the route that is slowly progressing as we go into Justice Hunters. We have a lot of decks that are able to establish boards on turn 0 without winning the die roll. Like Draco Tail can also do it because they can fusion summon on your turn. And so if they lose the die roll and they open Femena, they can probably still do it. Wouldn't recommend it because you go -3 for that. But it is something that we are slowly moving towards in the current format. And Chimera has a hard time playing on its own turn sometimes. So playing on its turn while your opponent is also playing on your turn is not ideal. Dragon Ruler, I don't have much to say. I think Dragon Ruler, because everything else is coming out, is just not happening. We have cards like Lollipo Yummy that can just put like a dragon back into the deck, so maybe you don't have the right attributes, or you can put a Dragon Ruler back into the deck from the graveyard, so he can't use his effect to like revive or whatever. We can also just put back your floodgates that are also being sent to the graveyard, like Archlord Christia, so that way we can prevent it from being revived. It's just not happening that much. Also, Malice is still around, Ryziel's still around. Like, I just think there are currently way too many powerful decks going into the upcoming format that a deck like Dragon Rulers is just too low to the ground. It's not going to be able to keep up. It was able to kind of keep up on release, but now I think it's just Yummy, Vanquish Soul, and Draco Tail are just like pushing it aside. Now, maybe a Draco Tail Dragon Ruler, maybe. I could maybe see that. And that's also just like a topic that is going to be very common for the rest of this list is we have way too many good decks in the current format. And like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I do like variety, but it's how powerful those good decks are. We have like 5 or 6 decks that are stonewalling the rest of the format out of the format. And it's very obvious because the best deck in the room is so good that the other decks have to compensate to be able to compete against it. And they're able to do that, but in the process, they built their power up so high that even like the rogue decks, like it's just not worth it. I think variety formats are good. They are very healthy for Yu-Gi-Oh! If the ceiling isn't incredibly high. We are in a variety format where the ceiling is really fucking high and low to the ground decks can't reach. Sky Striker, I'm not fully certain about Sky Striker. I have very little experience with the newer version of Sky Striker. Like Zero and Limsgate is really good and does a lot for the deck because Zero can get 2 bodies on the board and also pop a card, which one of those bodies is Ray, which means Ray gets you more interactability on your opponent's turn. But then on top of that, Limsgate gets you a quick synchro on your opponent's turn, so you can summon out a Zero if you haven't already. So it's interesting to say the least. That being said, I don't think we're quite there yet. I'm gonna put it at the very, very bottom of top contender because there will be more decks in this category. I think that a lot of the current decks like Ryziel Mitsurugi, Malice, Yummy, Vanquish Soul, K9 will be outpacing it. A big thing that it does have going for it is it has no hand effects because they don't really play hand traps. We are seeing people who play Sky Striker, though, kind of incorporate Song of the Dominators because they don't play hand traps. They kind of play like more of a board breaker style deck because they want to overload on spell cards so they can always have the spell count engrave. But they do have graveyard effects with Ray, and that's a problem when you're going against K9. Live Twin Fiendsmith, I can kind of see this being like top contender. I'm going to put it at the top of like Good Pilot Rogue. We are still seeing this deck top, like it did top at Nationals. I think there was one in top 32. So it is still possible, but this is very much, I think it needs a Good Pilot. I don't think any Joe Schmo who rolls up with Live Twin Fiendsmith can really like win games. I'm very much an advocate of decks don't win games, players do, but sometimes the deck makes it easier to do so. And Live Twin Fiendsmith is one of those decks, again, like it has a high ceiling to be good, but it's incredibly linear at that. And so it's always kind of really easy to see where the opponent's going. And, you know, with White Binder still running around the format, you know, Fiendsmith and Live Twin don't particularly like that. But on top of that, you know, just the Ryziel Detonator being able to pop stuff and Mirakumo being able to nuke the board, like your deck being able to play into that fully established board of Ryzen Mitsurugi is heavily dependent on like how good it is. Gem Knight, I think this is still a top contender. You all gave me so much shit in the last tier list. Like, oh, it's just a fluke. The deck's not that great. It's a going second strategy. Yeah, well, we saw with Tenpai, going second strategies work, especially if they can kill you on that turn. And sure enough, Gem Knight is one of those decks. We saw at Nats, it topped. It is a very competent deck. It is very much capable of just telling you no, cracking your board, and killing you right then and there. And if you decide, hey, I'm going to let you go first, yeah, that's not going to work because they're going to then go Infernal Flame Banshee, search out the Protoss essentially, and then they're just going to Protoss lock you because they know what you're playing at that point. So, you know, and, you know, all the Gem Knights, like they have every attribute under the sun essentially. So they're going to get the one that's going to tell you no. Big downside of this is though, is that their one like form of negation is in fact in the graveyard, which will turn on K9 cards, but at the same time, if they just Protoss lock you, like who fucking cares, right? Kashtira Fiendsmith, I think this is very quickly falling into Rogue. We are running into a format where you don't want to be activating too many hand traps in hand, or more rather, don't want to be activating too many monster hand traps in hand, because you don't want to turn on your opponent's K9 cards, and K9 is projected to be kind of everywhere. But at the same time, Kashtira Unicorn is still a big threat to any Ryziel variant because you are just going to kill them with that. But it is still like an okay deck. If you could play the Dominus cards, that would be more preferred. Dominus cards are definitely gaining traction and popularity because they are trap cards on top of that Imperm, obviously. Just like trap hand traps are going way too popular right now because K9. Luna Light is I'm gonna put this also kind of like very bottom of top contender because I think this deck would have been a lot better if Ryziel and Malice were not in the format, simply because Malice has White Binders. You can like banish bodies out of the graveyard, so that way they're not able to like get the Liger Dancer out right away. Obviously Detonator's a thing, Murakumo's a thing, so it's like you just activate a Pendulum monster, Detonator just pops it. Like the deck doesn't really perform all that much. Like the towers is whatever, but like Malice has a way around that. The Mitsurugi Ryziel has a way around it, so like they're not too worried. Like even Mitsurugi plays a kaiju in archetype, so they're not worried about this. Also on top of that, Vanquish Soul K9 also plays a kaiju. They play Dogaran, so again, I think in the next format, if we ended up getting a ban list before Worlds, this would have been a better deck because then the only real thing it had to worry about was Vanquish Soul K9's Dogaran, and then like Yummy and Dracotail were going to have to compensate and do something. But with Ryziel and Malice still sticking around, I don't foresee this being all that great. Like it's still up there and it will perform, but it's going to struggle to say the least. Pure Mitsurugi, definitely still a top contender. I've talked about Mitsurugi already. Like, it's just a good deck. Pure Mitsurugi plays pre-prep, which means they gain a bunch of consistency cards. It's not really anything to write home about. Like, it's gonna win games for sure. I have Orcus Mitsurugi here, but this is really just like Orcus anything. Like Orcus Fiendsmith 1 Nats, so it doesn't have to be Orcus Mitsurugi specifically, but like Orcus in general, even just pure, incredibly competent deck. It definitely doesn't like White Binder running around though, but you know, just hope that your opponent doesn't read, you know, Crown, and then you win the game, right? Just White Binder is obviously a big threat. Orcus probably isn't like a big fan of like Vanquish Soul because they can like pop Babel before Babel's a problem. So, and if you lose Babel, you're kind of struggling a little bit. Obviously, it's not. But this deck has been competing against the best decks in the format for a couple weeks now, with Ryzeal and Malice still running the format. So it's able to keep up, and it's going to continue to keep up, and I don't think Yummy or Vanquish Soul are going to really stop that. Punk Fiendsmith, I don't think this is worth talking about like that much. I believe there was a Punk top at Nats, but I don't think Punk is going to be able to keep up with the ceiling raising even further with Yummy and Vanquish Soul K9 coming out. However, maybe the deck can play the K9 cards. Who knows? For Genesis Kashtira, we're going to put it in Rogue Pilot. It's not really changing all that much. It's just, again, another one of those control style decks that plays a bunch of hand traps, just like Kashtira Fiendsmith. And I've already talked about how that's not like the greatest idea right now. So it's a fine deck. Pure Vanquish Soul, I think, is still a top contender for sure. It obviously competed against Ryzeal, Mitsurugi, and Malice plenty in Nats, with gaining a lot of top spots in the top 64 and top 32. It's a competent deck, and if you don't want to play K9 for whatever reason, because K9's incredibly cheap because everything's low rarity for the most part, it's still a competent deck. The problem is that Vanquish Soul K9 is its own counter. The K9 cards want you to activate cards in hand, and that's all Vanquish Soul does, is activate cards in hand. So it's kind of like a two-way blade. White Forest, I have a couple friends at locals that'll probably slaughter me for saying this, but I think White Forest is kind of lowering its play value as time goes on, because decks like Yummy and Vanquish Soul K9 can kind of just outpace it. Ryzeal Mitsurugi also just has been outpacing it for a while now. White Forest, again, is just like Chimera, one of those decks that heavily thrives on not being interrupted. And unfortunately, we are, again, running into decks that are playing on turn 0, and they have ways to interrupt you during your turn, during the first turn of the game. But then on top of that, the deck is littered with hand effects and grave effects, with both LZs activating in hand, the tuners activating in the graveyard, so you're always turning on the K9 cards. And not to mention, on top of that, again, White Binder is still running around, means you can banish all them tutors at the grave and just force their effects. Like, White Forest is very quickly dropping in just value to play. It struggles going second. And on top of that, like, Droll and Mistaken Arrest are still running around. It's getting caught in the crossfire. Like, it is kind of an iffy deck now. Like, if you play this deck, you're praying not to see so many variables more than Malice is praying not to see Lancia. Snake Eye of anything right now, I think, is bottom tables. I'm hearing thoughts and murmurs that maybe there'll be a Snake Eye engine in Yummy. We'll see. I think pure Yummy is just the way to go, but who knows? But yeah, Snake Eye anything, I think, just right now ain't the play. Crystron K9. We already know that Crystron's capable of playing rank 5s with Infinity, and sure enough, why not just play the best rank 5 engine in the game, which will be K9? And Crystron is already a competent deck. We've seen Yassine and plenty of other players topping with this deck, so K9 will just make it better and still able to keep up. I think in terms of where it sits compared to other decks, it's not moving in like the ranking per se, but because the K9 cards came out, those cards allowed it to keep up with the fact that the other cards are moving up on the ladder. Okay, so this could probably be a little biased when I say this, because I absolutely hate playing against this deck, but I genuinely don't think Water's the play. Water has seen less playability as we have moved on. We did see someone top Nats with it. It is still a competent deck, but the deck has a lot of hand effects, has a lot of graveyard, and I mean a lot of graveyard effects, so you're always turning on the K9 cards, which means the K9 Ripper will have the ability to negate one of those effects. So if they just negate like Dragoons, like that could be bad. Maybe not Dragoons, but or just negate the Abyss Rhine. They will always have interactability. Not to mention, just on top of that, like Yummy can stop stuff. Like if they just go like Yummy to negate the Abyss Rhine, and then you discarded Dragoons off Abyss Rhine, and so you go Dragoons effect, and they just go Purge, like, you're down 2 cards. And we still have Impulse running around thanks to like Mitsurugi Orcus, Pure Orcus, Pure Mitsurugi, Pure Malice. Like, All of the Dominus cards are really just running around, and that's also kind of like the thing that like is going to make Vengeful Canine a little less of the best deck, because the Dominus cards are everywhere, whereas we were just kind of like projecting it to be in like specifically Yummy. Memento, I have literally forgotten about this deck every single tier list for like the last 3 tier lists, and every single time one of y'all comments, "Oh dang, disrespecting the Memento," I'm not doing it this time, I promise. That being said, it's terrible. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Memento's still like a fine deck. It's kind of in the same category as like Mermail Atlantean, but a little bit better because it's able to adapt. The problem with Memento is there are so many decks that can kind of thwart the plans of Memento in the current format. Like, obviously, we have White Binder to banish names out of the graveyard, so, you know, you don't have 5 names, so you can't bring back the Combined Creation, or just banish the Combined Creation. We have Raizo Mitsurugi that's always just kind of like keeping you off bodies to establish a board, but also like Cross can negate stuff. Mirakumo is like a pseudo Omni Negate, and the deck also plays an actual Omni Negate trap card. We have decks like Yummy where they have Lollipo, so they can put like the Combined Creation back into the deck so you can't summon it. We have Canine Ripper, which can negate a graveyard effect. It can negate a hand effect. So there's just a lot going against Memento right now. But I think it's still like a top contender because not everyone's expecting it. Like this, the proof of this being is that even though this deck has topped and won a couple YCSs at this point, everyone keeps forgetting it exists, myself included. And the best way a deck can really thrive is if no one's thinking about it. But the deck also plays under Droll and Lockbird. It plays under Mistaken Arrest. It can kind of play under Fuelos and Perulia. It can play like a multitude. It can play like a multitude of different play styles depending on what it's playing against, and I think that kind of adaptability is what makes the deck able to thrive the way it does. Goblin Bikers, as much as I was really rooting for the Goblin Biker guy at the NAWCQ, I do think that he is an incredibly good pilot, and the entire situation was just perfect for this deck. So Goblin Biker, its best matchup is Xyz decks, and wouldn't you know it, one of the best decks in the room plays an Xyz monster that you really don't want having material. And that's going to be it for my Justice Hunters meta tier list, so hopefully I don't have to record this video a 3rd time because Konami decides to change their mind and drop a ban list 10 minutes after I finish recording this video. But let me know what y'all think down in the comments section below. Again, I don't personally like the fact that Konami is holding back a ban list after Worlds. It kind of makes sense simply because Justice Hunters is coming out so early to like so close to Worlds that just like making TCG players kind of like quickly adapt to learn like Yummy and all that is definitely like not the play. But on top of that, they're also cutting off like the idea that Raizo Mitsurugi players are now like looking at their deck and going like, oh well, I don't have to buy the new card because my deck's still better and stuff like that. So it's just an interesting situation. We also have cards like Protos, and we have a new Puppet Lock coming out with like an artifact card. We have Paradise Smasher running around. Like, we have just like a lot of really toxic cards that would be better if they got banned before Justice Hunters came out, but it is what it is. I am, of course, curious to hear what you all think, so let me know in the comment section below what deck you're going to be playing in the Justice Hunters format. I'm personally going to be playing Yummy or Malice since it's still live and I didn't sell it. We'll just have to see. But don't forget to leave a like on this video, and also, if you're not already and you like competitive-based content, consider subscribing to the channel for more. But with that, I'll see you all in the next one. See ya.